And welcome to season 2, episode 7 of the QCast. My name is Bob Quillman, and I'm really excited today to talk to one of the young head coaches in the CCIW and one of the greatest basketball players in the history of the CCIW, and that's Steve Djurickovic. Steve, it is great to have you on the QCast. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks so much for having me. Looking forward to it.
So Kenosha, is it snowing there? Give me the weather report up there in Kenosha.
Unfortunately, off the lake, we did get a little snow this weekend, but not terrible. I think our football team got lucky. It was about 50 to 60 for most of the home games, but that's why we play indoors, right?
Always beautiful in Kenosha, always beautiful at Tarble Arena. By the way, how nice is that facility that you guys have up there? It's incredible.
It's one of the best in the country. We think it's a perfect size for us. Seats about 2,500. They really did it correctly. About 10 years ago, when they completely renovated and gutted the facility, really gave us more of a game day atmosphere, which is what we're looking for. So you have the laser light show starting lineup. You have the parquet floor. They really did it well.
It looks amazing on the stream. I've watched a lot of your games. We're going to get into your team. You're 3-0. What a great start to the season for you. Maybe though we start with the fact that I haven't had a lot of people on here that literally grew up around the College Conference of Illinois and Wisconsin. Of course, your father was the longtime head coach at Carthage and North Park before that, legendary CCIW guy. What's your first memory of CCIW basketball? I'm just curious, where that goes back. Who were the players for Carthage that you first remember?
I'm glad you brought that up because I'm a CCIW lifer like you, and I follow all the sports, root for everybody when they get to the NCAA tournament, and just being around and seeing the history and so many great players, not just at Carthage and North Park, but across the league. It's been so fun to watch and follow their careers. But for Carthage, those early 2000 teams is when I was in middle school, and those were my guys growing up. And those are the main reasons. Jason Wertel, Antoine McDaniel, Rob Garnes, Theo Powell. I got to give Jimmy Boykwich a shout out, even though he's a Cubs fan, but we got to give him a shout out anyways. And that was my team growing up in middle school. And they Final Four, Final Eight, Sweet 16, I think their last 3 years.
What an incredible group that was. And to be, how old were you about that? Were you 8, 9, 10?
I was right around that range getting into the middle school. So right before getting to high school. So it was just so fun to watch them.
Jason Wertel was this left-handed 4-5 stud guy. Rob Garnes, I still can't believe, went to a Division III school. The most athletic guy that I've ever seen play in the CCIW. Would you agree with that?
Never took a bad shot in 4 years. Could finish anything around the basket. And I think people forget, I think he had all of our records as a wide receiver, even though he only played about 2.5 years for that too. He caught everything in his area. And if I have it right, his freshman year, conference championship game at Wheaton, I think he had 20 points and 19 rebounds as a freshman. Right. So, man, was he special.
And then you had the player I think was maybe the smoothest player I've ever seen in the league. Antoine McDaniel was a point guard. He was probably, 6'2", 6'3". Everything he did was not rushed. It was smooth. He had a beautiful shot. I mean, you talk about a guy, you played a lot of positions, but I still consider you a point guard. To grow up watching Antoine McDaniel, that's pretty good, right?
My favorite player ever. He, like you said, he was never rushed. He was always in the correct spots, got the ball to the people that needed to get it in their spots too. And it was just so fun. Everything that I did growing up was trying to emulate what Antoine did. And even I wanted to wear number 20, except for on our first road trip, we forgot number 20. So wore 21 and then I guess had a couple good games to open up with and didn't want to switch back. But everything was to follow in Antoine's footsteps.
You mentioned Theo Powell, who was this huge 6'7" guy that was just a monster in the post. And like you said, the underrated guy, Jim Boykwich, the Cubs fan, you'd say, he was really sort of a glue guy on those Carthage teams, wasn't he?
He was the enforcer, the best screen setter, the best high-low passer. And if you threw it anywhere over the top from Jimmy to either Rob or Jason, you knew the ball was going in the basket. So just the ultimate team player, one of the biggest supporters of Carthage athletics. He's been to a couple games already this year. And just we're so happy that, he stayed with the program for the last 20 years after he's been done.
Do you remember being in Salem? Because I do. I was in Salem in 2002 and Jeff Gibbs goes for about 25 and 20 or something on the Redmen at the time, right?
It was, and I think he got the opening tip, which might have been Jason Wertel's only missed jump ball of his career, took about 3 strides and they tried to throw him a lob dunk. And I think right then you knew this guy's special. And no matter what you did for the prep, and again, I was younger at the time following it, but wow, was he an impressive player. I think he was 25 and 16 as a senior.
Crazy. And I think in the national championship game, I think he went like 20 and 20. And so special player. He wasn't more. I think they listed him maybe 6'4". I think he was like 6'2". He was like
Probably.
a 6'2" dominant center.
His base was so good, and he just got anywhere he wanted around the basket. He obviously had the upper body strength too, and he was just a difficult guard for anybody at our level.
So you grew up around this stuff. You're in the middle of it, and then you become a great high school basketball player. I remember asking your father after, when you were about a freshman, because as a freshman you led the CCIW in points and assists, which you did all 4 years. That's crazy. But I remember asking your dad at one of those games, I said, where could Steve have played had he not chose to go play for his father? I'll just ask you that question, because your skill set in Division III, to be able to do what you did at the point guard position, I think at the Division I level, I don't think you would have been a 1, but certainly I always saw you maybe as a 2 or a 3 at that level. What level do you think you could have played at should you said, Dad, I'm going to go somewhere else?
It's so difficult to say, and everyone always has that hindsight looking back, and I'll never regret my decision at all. I had 4 unbelievable years, had the opportunity to play for my dad, and got to coach with him after the fact too, and now going to take over my dream job at Carthage and continue to build it on this side. But it would have been a little different. I think having your dad as the coach, I would say what my dad's done best over his 40 years is he puts his best players in the best spots for them to succeed. So even though I was a point guard in name, posted up a lot, was able to play off the ball sometimes when you had little quick pesky guys guarding you like Travis Rosencrantz and Sean Johnsons of the world, that you didn't want to have to get picked up 80 feet. So we were able to put us in different spots that way to be successful. So hard to tell that way, but I'm so glad, obviously, I chose where I did.
Yeah, and I always told people back during those years you were playing that you would have been, in my opinion, one of the best players on like Illinois State's team, across town from Wesleyan or Bradley, certainly Missouri Valley caliber player. But, just a note then to the kids you're recruiting right now, that's got to be pretty unique to walk into those living rooms and say, I know you have a Division II scholarship to UW, wherever, or, whatever.
Oh, yeah.
But here's the reason why Division III basketball is the right home for you. That's a unique perspective that you have. Is that fair to say?
I think so. And just being a part of it, seeing, again, the last 20 years, 25 years, my entire lifetime of CCIW, and just explaining to these kids that might not realize how competitive it is, not just in the CCIW and Division III, but just the top to bottom effort that you're getting in our league year in, year out. And I know you talk about it a lot too. Hasn't been an undefeated team in 40 some years now too. And I think that speaks volumes to our conference itself.
I think it's 48. And with your dad retiring, he was always the guy that made sure that message got out. He told every year for 20 years, he told me
Absolutely.
that. And so we need, Steve, to know that you are carrying that torch.
You
will be the guy.
I will continue that legacy. And with how good our league is this year, and we've seen some of the teams, the Sikma tournament this weekend was special with some great basketball being played. But man, this league top to bottom this year is very, very difficult. And every day you better be ready to compete.
And we'll talk about that. We'll get into the CCIW, but it's such a great, like your dad took such pride in that stat. Like I can still hear him saying, Harper didn't do it, Sikma didn't do it, Crabtree didn't do it. Like he had this script, which was dead on. And I've certainly picked that up in the Twitter universe, but coaching wise, we need to know that you're on that stat and you do the math every year. So thank you.
I am on it. I will continue the legacy that way.
So let's talk about the transition here. You were an assistant coach working for your father, and COVID season hits, a lot of things going on in the world. And then boom, I all of a sudden I see Bosko's retiring. And I can't remember if it was an immediate thing or if it took a while before it was announced, but then you get announced as the head coach. Talk about the whirlwind here of taking over for your dad. And that was now, a year and a half ago, but what was that process all like?
Interesting with the COVID year being, the backdrop of everything made it difficult. And I'm thrilled having my dad back coach with us this year. Last year with the amount of restrictions, it was just so difficult. And
right.
protocols, everything we had to go through, thought it was best for him to sort of stay away for the year. But what I was lucky with and blessed with, he gave me the keys a while ago to help me learn the last 4 or 5 years and just continue to get better as a coach. And he allowed me to have a lot of hands-on with the scouting reports, with the day-to-day runnings of practice, which I think really did help me. Having said that, nothing's different than having the team and you're the guy going into the fall. And on a COVID year where there were so many restrictions, I don't think we did any 5-on-5 in the fall last year.
Wow.
Our first 5-on-5 was in January of this past year, and we actually only had 4 days of full practice before we got to play Milliken. So last year was just, it was a little uncomfortable. I feel for the seniors last year having a limited year, but so great this year to have the full season of preparation and have the non-conference to start building up for the conference season.
But what is it like with the fact that your dad is on your staff? And so I think it's wonderful. In some ways, it's got to be a little challenging to work through, in that usually when someone retires, they're gone and the new guy has their own staff, which you certainly have your own staff. How have you and your father worked through the transition and having him there, but you're the guy? Like, how does that dynamic play out?
I think the year in between may have helped a little bit with that, but just having his insight, expertise, the experience of 40 years in the CCIW, we couldn't pass that up to have him back. And I'm thrilled that he's with us. He's been at every single practice. He's really helping mentor and develop some of these younger guys too, and just helping them along the way. He will not sit on the bench for game days. He would probably need a seatbelt for that, but he's done everything preparation wise. He's been with us every single day.
Your coaching style. So your dad had his own style, and we can remember how Carthage and North Park teams looked under your father. What would you define as your coaching style, Steve?
Well, I know it's going to be more laid back compared to what it was prior. So I think everything is going to be player led. And that's what I liked as a player. He gave us the opportunity to do what we did best. And the best teams are player led teams. I like to give our guys that opportunity to give us feedback, give us ideas, what they think's working. Philip Bulatovich has been fantastic early on in the year too. Some of the other guys that are growing into their roles, we're giving them opportunities to show what they can do on the court. And we listen to them. We're trying to say, what do you think is working for us right now? So really, our job is to put the players in the right spots. That's what we're here to do. And our guys are going out there and getting the job done.
And let's talk a little bit about your team and those players, because you're 3-0 right now. So you get off to a great start to the year. You beat Northland 120-72. You beat Defiance 81-47. You beat Finlandia 106-62. So you're off to a great start to the season. We'll talk about some players in a second, but you got to be thrilled getting off to the 3-0 start. You've won by comfortable margins. What are your thoughts here in the early going?
Where we wanted to be at this point, to be honest. You have 3 home games that we expected to win to set up a big challenge this weekend. And I watched the game on Saturday night, and it was as good of a battle in Division III as I've seen in a while. So we need to have 4 really good days of prep to get ready for Oshkosh. But I'm excited. I like our group. We have a lot of new faces, a lot of new pieces coming in, and we're just trying to get better day after day and try to build on that. And we're trying to gel. And I think having 5 days of prep, 2 games this week, having more prep, it's giving us a chance to really work on our timing, work on our cohesiveness, and just get better and better.
We'll talk about that big matchup you have this weekend, because that is going to be an awesome game to watch. But let's talk about some of your players on this squad, because you have a ton of talent, and you're led by a guy that probably could be an All-American, certainly a first-team All-Conference player, certainly a CCIW MOP candidate, and that's Philip Bulatovich. Now, tell me if I'm pronouncing, because I think it's Djurickovic with just a C, but I think is it Bulatovich?
Bulatovich for him, yes.
The CH, right. Bulatovich,
yes.
Djurickovic. I got it. Talk about Philip, 20 points, 10 rebounds, 6 assists a game, crazy numbers. He's a 6'5", kind of a wing player.
Correct.
I think he's got a little Steve Djurickovic in him, in that he is a guy that plays the perimeter. He likes to get in the middle of the lane. Is where he seems to do his most damage. Talk about your stud, Philip, if you would.
Philip's been great. And I think his jump from freshman year on a very experienced team where he was 10 a game to last year where he was the guy. And he led us in scoring, rebounding, and assists last year. And we put the ball in his hands a lot, as you could have seen from last year. He's got a quick first step. He's a dynamic athlete, and guys at his size, 6'5", 6'6", with the ball handling skills that he has, he's allowed to get to different places on the floor. He's got nice footwork on the post, and I know his goal this offseason, which he's worked a ton on, was his perimeter shooting. And he's done a way better job so far this year, shooting the ball with confidence, getting to the free throw line where he is so effective.
And his athleticism surprised me. I remember watching your game at Carroll, and I can't remember if it was the year before that, but he had a two-handed dunk against Carroll at their place. It was a stream. It was on the left side of the stream.
Yep.
He can jump out of the gym. Is that correct?
One of the best athletes that I've ever been around in all my years here at Carthage. He flies, and he does it in the half-court setting too. He's not one of those that, hey, I need a breakaway dunk like I would maybe get one or two in my life. He was able to do it in traffic with defenders around him, and he had one first weekend against Northland. That was one of the best dunks I've ever seen.
I saw that. I saw the film of that. And so he's an impressive player. I think anytime you can build around a player like him, it is huge for a coach. But then you've got a lot around him. So let's talk. Elijah Blake, a 6'2" junior guard, is averaging 20 points a game. He's 5 of 6 from 3 in the early going. So talk a little bit, if you would, about Elijah Blake.
Elijah Blake started his career at the University of Denver and had some injuries. Missed his senior year of high school, where they were #1 in the state, picked to win the state championship, and just a heck of a basketball player. He gives us an edge and a toughness on the defensive end. And I think our backcourt in the perimeter, with our size, our length, and experience, I think we have a chance to give some people fits. Between Elijah and Krishawn Cook, we have a long, athletic group of 22, 23-year-old perimeter defenders. But Elijah's been fantastic, more than we could have asked for on the offensive end, can score at all 3 levels, and is a really, really elite cutter at this level. You
mentioned Krishawn Cook, 9 points, actually 10 points, 3 rebounds, 4 assists, 6'2" senior guard. I believe he was not on, or he was hurt or not on the roster last year. Can't remember what it was. He has returned now, and he gives you a great level of experience at one of those guard spots. He's another experienced player, has had some injury problems over the years. This is the healthiest he's been since high school. And when he flies around the gym, he is as elite of a one-on-one defender as I think there is in the conference. His length, his upper body strength, and his quickness really can bother some guards. And I couldn't be happier to have 2 6'2", 23-year-olds on the perimeter that can really guard. Next kid I want to ask you about, first I'm going to tell a backstory, is everyone's got a moment where they realized how good Division III basketball was. And I was a freshman at Illinois Wesleyan, and a bunch of my buddies were on the basketball team, and I still didn't quite, it was probably February, I still didn't quite get it all, but we went on a road trip up to the Cracker Box at Foster and Kedzie. Oh, yeah. And I'll never forget watching a guy named Mark Horner play and thinking to myself, that guy is a Division III player. Like, to me, this guy was a Division I player. For sure. I remember him battling Jeff Keel and thinking, if this is Division III, like, I'm all in. And you have his son. I believe Garrett Horner is Mark Horner's son. Correct. He's averaging 12 and 6. He's a 6'4" sophomore forward, but a cool connection to the CCIW with Garrett Horner. I think you see that a lot on our roster and in the past few years with some of the North Park connection coming up to Carthage too. And Garrett's been fantastic. We've known the Horners for a long time. Garrett's mom was my babysitter when I was a kid at North Park too. So we go way, way back. And Garrett had an amazing freshman year for us, even more than we anticipated. He's a smart player. He can guard 1 through 4s, and he really gives us that option to space the floor around our, I think, nice playmakers with Phil, Chris, and Blake. So having him to space the floor, and again, the ability to guard 1 through 4 really helps us out. Then another kid with an interesting name here is we have a Bernero on the roster. So Anthony Bernero, I assume his father is Tim Bernero, the longtime women's Correct. Basketball coach at Carthage. 6'4" sophomore forward. He's giving you 9 points and 5 rebounds a game. Boy, he's really stepped into a big role for you this year. With losing Sean this past year, Sean Johnson, our last 4-year starting center, we needed somebody to pick it up. And I think between Anthony Bernero, who had a fantastic game yesterday afternoon, and Nemi Stojic from Maine South High School as well, teammate of Phil, they've really given us
good effort on the defensive end more than anything else, but are capable offensive threats. And I thought Anthony did a really nice job. He's worked his butt off in the offseason to get bigger and stronger. I think we had a little bit of an eye-opening CCIW experience as a freshman last year, having to guard some of the big guys in the league. And that really got on our guys this past year to say, hey, you got to get bigger, you got to get stronger and be able to compete at the top end of the league.
Recruiting wise, when you get the job and, you have the keys and you got to figure out what kind of guys to go get. And I think that takes time. I would say from being close to Ron Rose, that the kids Ron Rose recruited his first 2 or 3 years look different than the kids he recruits now. What's your current game plan? Like, who are you out there looking for?
As dynamic of players as possible. We're looking for people that can be multifaceted, guys that can score it from deep, but also maybe score it on the block. And I think those are the players that are going to be the most explosive and guys that can really help you play multiple positions. And we try to switch a lot in the perimeter. We try to put our players in best spots. And I think if you watch our team play, that's our goal. Get the ball to Phil where he wants to be comfortable. Get the ball to Elijah Blake, Krishan Cook, where they want to be comfortable. And the fact you can play multiple positions and you're not just that, back when I was playing too, some of our teammates were just traditional point guard, pass, space the floor. That's about it. If you can have 4 guys on the floor that can make plays, create for each other, it makes it much harder of a guard. And again, I don't want to repeat it, but watching the game Saturday, having 5 guys on the floor on both teams that could always put the ball in the basket, it really changes how the game's played.
Yeah, I'm almost thinking that that's where the game is going. It's where the CCIW is going. I'm with you that I can remember teams here just 5-10 years ago that had a guy that really was just a spot up shooter. He was a 2 guard. You kicked the ball to him. If he was open, he knocked down shots. Seems like now that you need to have at least 4 guys on the floor that are mobile. There's certainly not a lot of pure 5s anymore. You can get away with having 1 guy that's a big guy that doesn't move that well, but is that where the game is moving, you think, as we move forward?
I think so. I think the game is being spaced more and more. It's putting the onus on the defense to be able to guard multiple positions the entire time too. And just the dribble drive and the spacing of the floor and how much better people are shooting the basketball now than it was 5 years ago, 10 years ago when I was playing too. So that's really changed. And I think for the better. I think it's more fun. I think allows people to create plays, not as much of the back down post play. I know that's a point of emphasis this year where it used to be, but I think it really opens up and gets a much better flow for the game.
So you have a huge matchup coming up, no offense to Northland Defiance Finlandia, but the toughest team you're going to play in the early going here is the Titans of Wisconsin-Oshkosh. You mentioned you watched the game against Illinois Wesleyan, and I was there Friday night. I thought Oshkosh, to me, was a team that could win the national championship. I thought Illinois Wesleyan's that type of team. What is your impression of the Oshkosh Titans? What did you see there in that game, albeit watching the stream?
Play with an unbelievable pace and an unbelievable confidence on the offensive end, and on the defensive floor, they make no mistakes. They are so correct. They're well coached. Coach Lewis has done a great job there the past few years too. And they're going to make you work for everything you get on the offensive end. On the defensive end for us, their movement and their cutting in their offense is as good as there is in the country. And with the playmakers that they have and the shooting that they have, they're going to be a really tough matchup for everybody this year. And then you have a guy in the block who is as good a footwork as you'll see in the country too, and just goes with a high motor for 40 minutes.
Yeah, I felt in watching the game on Saturday that Illinois Wesleyan had a very hard time in the low post, even though the Titans have a 6'7" stud that's very skilled back to the basket. Like Matt Laritz couldn't get down there often. And when he did, he just seemed to have no space. Like they help so well. That's got to be something. I mean, defensively, maybe they don't have like 6'9" Jack Flynn in there, but do you agree they play really big? They play way bigger than 6'4" or 6'5" or whatever.
I mean, if you look at their lineup, I mean, they're all strong guards that can play. I mean, 6'5" at the shooting guard, 6'4" at the Peterson when he came in as a 2, probably 3 now, more slots into the 4 spot. And it makes him such a tough match because they're able to switch on the perimeter a little bit. But you're right, they're able to dig in the post and recover without losing any ground. And they just force you to get further and further away from the basket. And they're a physical team. They're a tough team. They're a plus rebounding team. And that's something that, again, with our losing a Sean Johnson safety net of 10 rebounds a game and 230 blocks in his career, we've really emphasized keeping people out of the paint and collectively rebounding ball.
You know, it's funny that Oshkosh came into the year with a guy that was considered an All-American, number 30, who's a stud, Levi Borchert, I believe it's pronounced. And they've got 2 guys that started their careers at Division II schools. Eddie Mensch is a 6'5", athletic shooter, scorer, driver. They have a point guard in Hunter Plowman that's from Minnesota Duluth that I think is up there with any point guard in Division III. If you want to talk Buzz Anthony, Jake Rohde, whoever, they present problems because they don't just have one guy. They've got 3 superstars and they're deep, right? I mean, that's got to be a hard team to prepare for.
They don't go a lot of guys, but the depth 1 through 9 is super impressive. I mean, Hunter's been playing fantastic early on in the year. He's got the ball on a string. He can get anywhere he wants on the floor. And when he makes his perimeter shots, he's a really, really tough guard. Eddie's been around for a while, and he's a career 40% shooter for his life. You know you got to run him off the line. And it just makes it so much harder where some of the other guys, there's no reason why outside of those 2 plus Levi, somebody else could get 15 to 20 any day for them. And that's what makes them such a difficult matchup.
Scheduling in general, you guys went out and you and Coach Lewis decided to play this game knowing that you're playing good opponents. I think your dad certainly always played a great schedule. What does a game like this do for you, the preparation, your program? What's the value of a game like this Oshkosh matchup?
Playing one of the elite teams in the region, in the country, has our full attention. I think has everybody in the locker room's full attention that this is where we want to get to. This is where we want to be consistently one of the best teams in the CCIW, one of the best teams in the country. And this is a game that can put you on the map. So we'll be more than prepared for it. I think we've played them 6 of the last 8 years right now. Oshkosh, try to play a nice schedule that way. On our trip this year, we get to play Tufts and who I believe is 10th or 11th in the country, and Barry, who won their league last year at 13-1. So have some really nice non-conference opponents coming up that ready for it because some really good basketball being played.
Those are fantastic matchups, and it's so cool when you get to see matchups of teams that usually don't play each other. So Carthage playing Tufts is one of the cooler matchups you will find because it gives you a chance to assess the strength of regions and different parts of the country. It's a really cool matchup.
We try to do one trip a year. I've gone across the country to California, to Florida, Puerto Rico, and play different teams that give us the styles of play are so different when you play a team from California to Texas, to the Northeast, to the Midwest. So it's fun to see those different styles. And I know last time, I think we were in down to Florida, played Eastern Connecticut State when they went to the Sweet 16. We played Washington and Lee. We played former Southern Vermont, who won their league 3 straight years. Like, you're playing really good teams across the country to help, again, get you ready for conference, but hopefully help you out when it gets to this selection time as well.
I'm going to be watching your trip scheduling because, the places that you all listed of what, the trips you guys have taken, that sounds totally like Bosko scheduling because here's the common theme: sunny, 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 sunny. Your father was a master at finding the destination in the winter to get away from that Kenosha winter. Is that correct?
If he was mad at us, he would threaten every year that we were going to Minnesota, but we all knew that we were going to somehow end up at a beach somewhere. So we were in LA, we were in Miami, went to Hawaii 4 times. And I think now looking at on this side of the coaching part of it, now I know why. I think this is more for him than anybody else.
I'm going to be keeping an eye on where these trips go in the Stevie era. Let's talk about the CCIW for a little bit. It's a hard league to be young in. I look at some of the teams like Milliken and Carroll that have very, very young nucleuses. Mm-hmm. And it's a difficult league because this year in particular, there's 3 teams ranked in the top 10. So you have Illinois Wesleyan's 4, Wheaton 6, Elmhurst is 10. And then, oh, by the way, Augustana just beat Dubuque, and you got North Central in there with all their guys back.
2 all-conference players back.
You guys are loaded. And so it just, you look at the league, not to mention, I think North Park has a lot of really good players coming back, and they knocked off Illinois Wesleyan last year. So Talk about the league and preparing for the CCIW.
It's always tough. We know that. I said that at the beginning. You have to play. Breaking stuff back there. You have to play every single day like it's the most important one. You got to go 1-0 every single day. And North Park, depth, really, really good. We know that. They brought a lot of key pieces back, have a nice transfer coming in as well. Milliken, watched some of their game against Wash U. My goodness, was that an excellent basketball game. They guard the heck out of you. Kramer's doing an excellent job down there too. So I would say, again, top to bottom, the league is so competitive, and it is hard. We have some young pieces trying to gel. I think we have that nice combination of young with old.
And by the way, we're tipping off our big news, which is there is a special guest. This is not a custodian at Tarble Arena, folks, that is now working on these curtains. We're now joined by Bosko Djurickovic, my old CCIW friend. And Coach, it is great to see you. When Steve offered the little segment at the end here, I said, if you could pull that off, that would be one of the coolest things in the history of the QCast. It's great to see you. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, thank you. I just ran up 3 flights of stairs at Steve's house.
Sorry to get you
catching my breath, but everything is going great. So since we visited last, I've got a new hip. I had my cataracts done, so I could go back and do this for another 10 years.
Well, just a couple of questions, as I know you guys are busy, but Bosko, we've talked a lot over the years in CCIW gyms, and just a statement first is thank you so much for you're one of the advocates for the College Conference of Illinois and Wisconsin. You think of the Jack Hornbergers of the world, and you think about the people that got us to this point, Denny Bridges and Borcherding, and you are one of the people that has been one of the strongest advocates for the league. Talk about your history with this conference and why you've always stayed so true and committed to it.
It's a great league from a competitive point of view. It's a great league from an experience point of view. It's one of the best leagues at our level as far as getting people to still come out and enjoy the games. And what more can you say? I don't know that anybody comes through any of our schools that does not have a positive experience if it goes well for them on the court, on the field, etc. And I think that's what we're always trying to sell. And it is a heck of a league. I started with Fred Evans. You know who Fred Evans is?
Absolutely.
1 year Wesley, an unbelievable player, 1970. And now I'm sitting visiting while you're talking to Steve. So we've covered a lot of ground, and it's been a lot of fun. Every minute has been.
I told Steve early when we just got started that someone has to carry the torch on the message that every year when it becomes official, there won't be an undefeated team. He's got to be the guy now that reminds people that. I've been trying to do it on social media, but he's got to be the guy. In all seriousness, that is a record that I know that you are very proud of. I've heard you say it, like Sikma didn't do it, Thomas didn't do it, Crabtree didn't do it. What an amazing, I think we're at 48 years now. Talk a little bit about that streak.
The negative part about the streak was I was part of the last 16-0. That was Hamming and Lang dunking over me when I was playing for Coach McCarroll at North Park, 1973, 1972, whatever it happened to be. But what you just said is absolutely the fact. Sikma, the Harper Thomas years, Crabtree, the Barrett Starks years, the group since then, the Miljanovic group, the Wortel Garns McDaniel group.
The Augustana group of the last 20 years, right?
20 years, and they've had a couple shots at it, and none ever made it, and that speaks volumes for our league.
As you look to the Steve Djurickovic era, and I know that you're on the staff and you're a big part of what's going on there, but talk about a little bit the transition to Steve. I mean, that we talked like this is a little bit, it's very cool to have you on the staff. It's also, you guys have had to probably work through the dynamics of that. I mean, here's the guy that's been there forever and ever. He's still on the staff. How have you worked through that, Bosko?
It's an easy transition. When people used to ask me years back about the 3 kids that I have, Mandy and then Steve and then Pete, how it was coaching Steve. And I said, Steve was the only one that it would have worked with. Mandy would have cried and Pete would have fought me every step of the way. And Steve was the line of the group that worked. And he's the easiest guy to work with because I'm not really trying. I'm not sitting on the bench. I'm not going on the bus trips. I've been at practice every day. I try to help them with the individual workouts for the kids. I'll go out and see games for them. I'll break film down for them. But this is Steve's basketball. I don't want any part of it. And I think that's part of the reason beautifully so far.
I was watching the game yesterday and John Weiser started saying, I hear Coach Bosko coming from some part of the rafters, and you weren't on the bench. Did they have you in like a luxury suite coaching? Is that where you're at there in Tarbell?
I think, and most people would suggest that I would be in a padded room before I'd be in a luxury suite, because I'm likely to say something that I probably shouldn't. But it's not, you know me for 50 years. It's never personal. It's just, as a coach, you just don't want to see bad play, and there's always bad play, regardless how good your team is.
Just a couple more questions to Bosco, and then we'll finish up with Steve. But the game has changed dramatically. I've gone back and watched the video of the North Park three-peat teams, and the game is it's a different game. But when you watch the caliber of guys that played for North Park, I'm talking the 78, 79, 80 group, which you were very much part of as an assistant. How do you compare that era to this era?
It's a really fair question, and it doesn't have an easy answer. Because if you go back and look at the videos of Bill Russell and Wilt Chamberlain and Jerry West, Oscar Robertson, you'd say those people can't play today. The game is in slow motion. It's like watching, you're a baseball hardcore guy like I am. You've seen some of the real video of Babe Ruth running around the bases. So the game has changed that way dramatically. Having said that, and I get myself in trouble sometimes because people say, yeah, you're from old time CCIW, it's hard to imagine that you could have better players than Hamming and Lang and Jack Sikma and Michael Harper and Michael Barrich. You've seen most of these somewhere along the line. So I think it's unfair that we should say that the current era is better than the old era, but it's fun to compare because, these are people are doing the same things at the same schools, and that makes it neat.
In terms of the best CCIW player, let's take Steve out of the conversation, even though he's in the conversation. But a lot of folks at my alma mater, of course, will assume that it's Jack Sikma because he was a 7-time NBA All-Star. Now, what our friend Greg Sager will remind us is that one of those guys back on the North Park three-peat may have had a better college career than Jack Sikma. Who is the best CCIW player, taking Steve out, that you have seen?
Well, you just laid the parameter for the discussion. Who was a better college player, Bill Walton or Kareem Abdul-Jabbar? And you can make a legit argument that Bill Walton was the better UCLA player than Jabbar was, obviously because of injuries that didn't work out that way in the pros. Jack Sikma is a legendary CCIW story, Division III story, for what he accomplished. And he was a ridiculously good player at Wesleyan. Michael Harper, Coach Bridges would fight to the death because had they not been in the NAIA, he thinks he'd have won a couple with Sikma, but they didn't. And Michael Harper and Michael Thomas won 3. And that does kind of tilt the scale just a little bit.
Well, I certainly appreciate it. For those that are tuning in that don't know, Coach Djurickovic won the national championship in 1985 and 7 and had a huge hand in those three-peat teams. He's been one of the strongest advocates of Division III and CCIW basketball that you will ever find. And I'm just realizing in the last 3 days, I've been around Coach Bridges and now Coach Djurickovic. And it's pretty cool to be able to talk to you guys about all of the experience that you guys have had around the league. And I hope you stay around a long time.
Hey, I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on. And Steve's going to do a great job. We couldn't be more proud of him. You missed 2 topics, right? Still need a right fielder, still need a second baseman.
Well, we do.
And I believe the alma mater is still running around in the football semis.
Yeah, they are. And so we're going to need a lot of help. First of all, the White Sox we're talking about here is we came up short this year, and we clearly I think we need a number 3 hitter that can play either second base or right field. We need a leader. We need a contact guy, a high average guy. We got a bunch of guys that hit like 5, right? And they're all trying to hit 2 and 3, can't do that. So there's a lot going on right now in this offseason world of the White Sox. And we can all agree that Jim Obojkowicz's team is not the best team in Chicago, correct?
We agree. Jimmy agrees. He's been up to a couple of games already and had a chance to visit, and he just shakes his head because some of the people, as you know, Jim works very closely with the players. So some of the people that have no longer around were personal friends. So he misses that part of it, as well as the fact that the team isn't very good anymore. That doesn't break the hearts of any of us White Sox fans.
Well, I always appreciate, when I was doing the radio for WJBC, I always knew that I could walk into the Tarbell offices and find you sitting somewhere, and you were always gracious with your time in recording an interview. So thanks for not being one of the guys that big times anybody, and that's much appreciated.
Hey, listen, you do. It's fun. When we started, we're talking about this, and it's the last one I'll tell you because I could tell stories. We used to have to check the scores from different gyms, and I used to have memorized all the telephone numbers to the sports departments of the different newspapers. So I'd be on the phone and I'd be calling the Pantograph. And I said, "What happened in the Wesleyan?" And they didn't know. He'd yell, "Let me check it for you." And he'd come back 30 seconds later. Now, partly because of the D3 stuff, partly the stuff that you and others have done, it's just so much easier. And there's so much more discussion of Division III basketball than there ever has been. And that's cool. It really is.
It has been a lot of fun. And of course, I think we had the year where the 5-guard offense was being played, where I think one of your guys checked the board. And I had said that the Titans were going to start 5 guards that day, and somehow it got to you, and you told them that was not possibly going to happen. But there's been some anecdotes like that over the years.
I don't think Jack Sikma would appreciate it. Sikma, who invented the Sikma step. The step
correct.
Away from the basket, score up. So I'm a 23-year-old just starting with Coach McCarroll. I says, I got this down. I says, what we'll do is we'll step right inside of his pivot leg and we'll trip him. And sure enough, the first time down the court, he fell down and called traveling. Second time, he got off a funny shot. Then he proceeded to score 44 points, block 10 shots, and get about 3 dunks. Needless to say, Coach McCarroll was the farthest thing from happy that I'd come up with this novel way to stop Jackson. So
we need
he
to
loves that one. That's a good story that comes up occasionally.
At some point, just promise you'll write a book of some sort, or we can record all of this in memoirs, like, my time around the CCIW. We need to make sure this is all captured somewhere.
You know what? You think about that sometimes. I've talked to Coach Bridges about it. Coach McCarroll is in on that situation. I don't know that it needs to ever be done professionally or really, but the discussion points and the fun, just going back and talking about the different teams. And that's part of what sets it apart. I don't know that any other Division III leagues have got the tradition, rich history that ours does. And for that reason, there is discussion as to Sikma and Harper. They played 40 years ago.
Right.
And they were par none, but that was 40 years ago, and time's gone by and their names still come up, and that's pretty cool.
Well, certainly appreciate your time, Bosko. And
my pleasure. Anytime I can do anything to help you, just let me know. You guys can finish it up. Steve, I'll talk to you later this afternoon.
Thank you so much. And just finishing things up with the head coach of the Firebirds. Is it Firebirds? Do I have that right?
Firebirds, correct.
Okay, Firebirds. I can't quite get used to that yet, but I'm going to.
We're getting used to it too. I love it. I think it's a good change. It's going to help the branding opportunities around the campus. So it's been a fun change. And
thank you so much for bringing your father in. When you offered that up earlier today, I thought that would be really one of the cooler things that we've ever done on this little QCast. So that was amazing. Keys to the season. Let's just kind of leave it there before we start to wrap up. Is you guys are sitting here 3-0. You've got Oshkosh Saturday. As you look back on this season, come sometime in March, what will have ended up being the keys for your Carthage team?
Number one, rebounding the basketball. Again, some of the teams are getting a little bit smaller across the board. We know that, but we need to be a plus rebounding team for us to have the success that we want. 2, perimeter defense and making that a plus again for us and not just an average threat for us. Last few years, we've not been great guarding the 3-point shot. That's something we've emphasized a lot early on for the first few weeks of preseason, and keeping people out of the paint. And I've said his name a few times. We had the luxury of a shot blocker on the back end the last few years. We do not have that anymore. So I think that puts a lot more pressure on our guards and on our rotations.
Sean Johnson was one of those guys that, I always say, there's certain players you could say, come to a game, and if you don't think you're good enough to play Division III, go watch Sean Johnson, 6'10", 6'11", whatever he was, incredibly skilled, right? So like you look at him and you think he ought to be playing at a mid-major somewhere, but what a luxury it was to have Sean Johnson in the middle there.
We had, for a 3-year stretch, you had Brad Perry and Sean Johnson, 2 6'11" completely different players, but equally effective in their own right. Perry was a shot blocker as well, could not move him off the block. And I think he might be one of our top career leaders in field goal percentage. Sean Johnson, an elite mover and athlete on both ends of the floor, had as good of timing as anybody that I've been around to blocking shots. And like you said, he had the ability to face up and shoot the ball. And another kid who just got better and better over his time. And I think he put on about 30 pounds in the weight room from coming in at his 6'11", 190-pound frame. And it's never good when you weigh the same as the coach at 16. He finished at about 6'11", 225 pounds, which had a heck of a career.
Just one more section that I'm just going to rattle off some numbers here, getting back to Steve's playing career, because you've been out of school. It's hard for me to believe you've been out 10 years now, right?
Yes, unbelievable.
It goes fast. Believe me, my friend. Is this Friday? I turned 50 this Friday, and that's hard for me to believe because I still think I'm like a 25-year-old guy going to Wesleyan games with Crabtree in the stands or in the lineup. But so check this out. So Steve was a 4-time first team all CCIW player, 4 times. He was a 4-time D3hoops.com All-American. Both of those things are ridiculous. He's the 4th all-time leading scorer in CCIW only games. He scored 1,348 points. He's the 3rd all-time scorer in terms of all games, scored 2,547 points, led the CCIW in scoring and assists. So let me have everyone process that. A lot of guys lead the league in scoring. He led it in scoring and assists, not for 1 year, for 4 years. He did that as a freshman, a sophomore, a junior, senior. He was a 2-time CCIW MOP, played in the same era as guys like Kent Raymond. So you talk about kind of the eras and the great players. He was the 2009-10 D3hoops.com player of the year. There's a bunch of other things I could rattle off, but when you look back at your legacy as a player, I mean, you got to be pretty proud at what your team accomplished, what you accomplished back in those 4 years at Carthage.
Loved it. Wouldn't change anything about it. Maybe the Sweet 16 game at Stevens Point against Wesleyan that we want back, and missed a few too many shots, open looks that we had. But again, anytime you play a team 4 times in a year, especially a conference rival like that, it's going to be basically a coin flip. So you mentioned again Kent Raymond, playing against him, and I think my first conference game as a freshman, I believe, was at Wheaton. And I think I had 20 points in the first half, and I thought, this is easy. Kent guarded me in the second half, and I think I had 1 point or 2 points, and that's when you realize this is a different level. And guys that you saw, Kent Raymond, a 215-pound guard that he controlled where you wanted to go, and he would force you off the block 3 steps. He had good length, he had good quickness, and just, again, one of the best players that I've ever competed against. But overall, love my experience at Carthage, love my experience at the CCIW, and hopefully I can continue to, keep that legacy going of CCIW and just increasing the brand recognition of what Division III is.
Well, I really appreciate all this time. Again, appreciate you getting your father in here for a little chat. That was really cool. We'll like to give you the last word here. So a lot of people will be tuning into this from the CCIW, from Division III. What would you like to say to those folks that are tuning into the QCast here today?
Get out to a Division III basketball game locally, wherever you're at. It is such a high level of play, much better than a lot of people anticipate until they walk into the gym. And you mentioned it earlier on the cast that a lot of people think they're above this level, and once they get to a game, and a perfect example was we have the same effort and ready to play on Saturday. It's high level basketball, and if you get a chance, go out and see some of these teams around your area.
That's Steve Djurickovic, folks, the head men's basketball coach of the Carthage College Firebirds. That was season 2, episode 7 of the QCast. I think you're going to have a lot of fun with that one. Steve, thank you so much for all of this time today.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.